Welcome to WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. It's your old pal Jake, and this is Salty Saturday. That usually means we're not going to focus on being productive. We're just going to enjoy being salty. My goal is eventually to respond to MAGA trolling with supercuts on Salty Saturdays, and then intercut some fun things as well. But y'all are too nice. We just don't have tons and tons of negative comments, and you know what? I like that. It's fun. I normally quite enjoy reading through the comments. Perhaps I'll try to bait out some with I don't know, a video praising a black woman. That has a tendency, or any person of color, and in particular females. That does seem to bring out the trolls. God help us. But in the meantime, I thought we'd use this Salty Saturday just to have a fun stream. You know, a little bit more lighthearted. It's not going to be lighthearted. I'm going to attempt to be a little more lighthearted. And also, just take time that we wouldn't normally have to really delve into something. In this case, it is all of Trump's crimes. 45's 56. This guy has not had to answer for dozens and dozens of crimes committed beginning in 2015 till now. It's just been one long crime spree, and we have not done anything about it. We just let him. We just let him. We're gonna break it down, and to help us, we have Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, an article from them, which gives a pretty good view of things. I'm also gonna pause from time to time and try to read some viewer comments. But first, let me just give you the context in which I am telling you about this. The United States has a ridiculous view of itself and the way it operates. Look at every Republican president from Nixon till now. Every one of them. All these SOBs committed crimes while in office. Let's break it down so we're crystal clear on how pathetic the United States is when it comes to holding powerful people responsible, in particular conservatives. Richard Nixon, believed to be involved in the Chenault affair, wherein Vietnam peace talks were sabotaged. He is believed to have orchestrated that. No punishment. Wasn't even broached. The American public didn't even have the opportunity to learn about it until decades had passed. How many people did he get killed with that action? We just don't know. Also, Watergate. While in office, he was given a pardon. His punishment was that he was he had to leave the job he was doing. That was his punishment. He got fired, essentially. The punishment for you being late to work 3 days in a row is to get fired. The punishment for a president of the United States trying a coup, which is what Watergate was, is to get fired. Same as if you are late to work for 3 days in a row. Same punishment. His vice president, Spiro Agnew, took cash bribes, literal bags of cash bribes, while in office. Also no punishment. Also, it was told to him that he would have to not assume the presidency after Nixon left. That was his punishment for taking literal cash bribes in office. The podcast Bagman by Rachel Maddow breaks that down. It's fascinating. It's also deeply depressing. Following him, we have Ronald Reagan. Oh, would you have a gander at that gentleman? And his vice president, George H.W. Bush, both involved in the Iran-Contra affair. This is where they did an illegal arms deal to fund terrorists who were attempting to overthrow a socialist government in Nicaragua. No punishment whatsoever for either of them. George W. Bush lied to the American people. He had Colin Powell lie to Congress. What did he lie about? Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. In fact, he had intelligence saying the opposite, saying that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And yet, he told the American people, and he had Colin Powell tell Congress, that we had intelligence saying the opposite. That is a straight-up lie. As a result, 7,000 Americans died during that war that was started over these phantom weapons that he knew were not there. 7,000 American soldiers died. 8,000 contractors died fighting for the US of A. An unknown number of people in the Middle East died. We weren't counting as we were killing. We did, in the early 2000s, something pretty close to what Russia is doing now. Only we never said we were going to stay there forever. We stayed there for 2 decades. George W. Bush could still be punished for this. Bad time to bite my tongue. George W. Bush could still be punished for this. Should still be punished for this. I know he was never pardoned for it. Let's keep him on the radar for when we deal with this next guy, because this next guy is the subject of today's stream. This next guy is believed to have committed 56 crimes between 2015 and today. At least 56 crimes. None of which have resulted in him receiving punishment. He was impeached twice to no avail. America didn't have the willpower to hold a powerful person accountable. We were either too gullible or too weak to get it done. We're finding our legs as a country that is now taking justice seriously, in theory. But it has only been through constant pressure from the American public. You constantly applying pressure to the people whose job it is to go after people like this. We got to keep it up. The reason we have to keep it up is presented here. This is an article by CREW. That stands for Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. They have compiled the believed crimes that 45 committed while in office, and also in the election leading up to his taking office. Because it wouldn't be a Trump presidency without crimes to get elected. That just wouldn't be fitting. Let's read a little bit of what they had to say in the intro. See when this article was written, and by the way, you can believe there were crimes after this, because in the world where he doesn't get punished for anything, this prick keeps committing crimes. Title of the article is President Trump's Staggering Record of Uncharged Crimes. As of November 2022, Donald Trump has been credibly accused of committing at least 56 criminal offenses since he launched his campaign for president in 2015. The total only reflects allegations relating to his time in or running for office and omits, for instance, Trump's criminal exposure for fraudulent business dealings. This guy is a professional criminal, and we allowed him to sit in the Oval Office. We allowed this to happen. The 8 offenses we have added since we published the first version of this table in March 2022 include 3 criminal offenses relating to the investigation of election fraud and related crimes in Fulton County, Georgia. 1 offense relating to potential wire fraud stemming from fraudulent representation made to solicit PAC contributions after the 2020 elections. 1 perjury offense relating to Trump's legal efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Again, that is a coup. And 3 offenses relating to Trump's unlawful possession of government records at Mar-a-Lago after leaving office. The updated tracker likely understates Trump's legal exposure because of the high volume of sensitive records discovered at Mar-a-Lago. Because the high volume of sensitive records discovered at Mar-a-Lago suggests that he could be indicted for multiple counts of willfully retaining without authorization government records containing national defense information in violation of yada, 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 even though it is only listed once in Crew's tracker. Federal and state prosecutors are at an important crossroads with respect to accountability for the former president. And I say, with respect to accountability for any presidents. Are we in a monarchy or not? That's the question. So far, it appears we are. In all but writing, we are living in a monarchy where our leader has absolute authority. They are not subject to the same laws the rest of us are. It is not what the United States has claimed to be. On the one hand, the deadline has already passed or will soon pass for charges relating to several extremely serious offenses. As in, when they say the deadline has already passed for these extremely serious offenses, they mean he got away with them. We let him. That includes offenses relating to Trump's 2016 presidential campaign, as well as his obstruction of the FBI's investigation of Russian interference in the 2016 election and the subsequent special counsel investigation. I want to add one thing to this before we go on to the big list, which we shall shortly. We ought to put in a rule that says so long as the Department of Justice has a policy of not indicting a sitting president, then the counter, the clock on when an offense can be charged must be paused and extended by the time that person is in office. Plain and simple. If we are serious about holding law-breaking presidents accountable for breaking the laws, which we ought to be if we are not in a monarchy, if we want to demonstrate that, we need to include that law in our legislation. Call it whatever you want to call it, but that is what we should do. Let's read through some of these offenses, and we're going to go to coverage at the time and coverage presently of what this involved. Campaign finance crimes and related cover-up. By the way, on the top there, you can see we've got the category, the relevant conduct, the approximate date it happened, potential offenses committed. I'm going to skip the statutes because it's kind of irrelevant. Doesn't matter for our purposes. The investigation status, you're going to see a lot of red here. That means nobody's doing anything. Nobody is doing anything about it. And the likely deadline to file charges. Red means it's passed. Red means now nobody can do anything about it because nobody did do anything about it. All right, let's break it down. Campaign finance crimes and cover-up. He caused Michael Cohen to make and or accept an unlawful individual contribution in a February 2015 online poll. Happened in 2015. It's causing or accepting an individual contribution in excess of the lawful limit. In other words, it's just a straight-up campaign finance crime. The investigation was closed while Trump was president. And the deadline to do anything about it passed in 2020. He got away with it. We let him get away with that. Campaign finance crimes, causing Donald J. Trump for President LLC's failure to report AMI's contribution in the case of the Karen McDougal story. Happened approximately 2016, causing the potential offenses were causing a campaign committee to fail to report an unlawful corporate contribution. Again, that's campaign finance crimes. The investigation was closed while Trump was president. The deadline has also been passed. It was passed in 2021. If the conduct is treated as an independent event of 2022, the conduct is considered to be part of a series of continuing wrongs or conspiracy. Or 2022 if the conduct is yada, yada, yada. So the point being, it's 2021 if it was considered only for 2016, but it's already passed. 2022 was the date it could have been if you would have considered it part of the 2020 election, that cover-up. I would have. I would have loved to see the government do it. Where was Merrick Garland? Where was he? Because 2022 passed. We can't do anything about it now. That is another crime he permitted Donald Trump to get away with. Merrick Garland allowed him to get away with this. If there was an investigation at all that I was aware of, if they reopened this investigation, I didn't hear about it. I didn't hear about it. Campaign finance crimes and cover-up. Let's just roll down this list. 2016, campaign finance crimes and cover-up. 2016, going through Cohen. Bunch of these times. Campaign fines and cover-up. 2016. Campaign crimes and cover-up. 2015 through 2017. Conspiring to defraud the United States by undermining the lawful function of the FEC and or violating federal campaign finance crimes. 2022 is when the deadline passed. Same notes for Garland. Where the F were the charges? Let's just roll down the rest of this page. It's all campaign finance crimes. The date for all of it has passed in 2022. We can't do anything about it anymore. In case you're having trouble recalling what this is we're talking about, let's let NBC tell us about it.
Playboy playmate Karen McDougal says she was paid off to stay silent by an associate of President Donald Trump. McDougal claims she had an affair with Mr. Trump in 2006. And in a lawsuit filed today, McDougal says AMI, the company that owns the National Enquirer and whose chief executive is a friend of President Trump's, paid her $150,000 to keep her story secret. McDougal claims the agreement is invalid because the media company and her lawyer at the time misled her about the deal. And the parallels are striking to Stormy Daniels, her attorney releasing this photo today, which he says shows the adult film actress taking a lie detector test in 2011. NBC News has obtained the polygraph report, which shows the examiner.
First up, just how crazy is it that there's two separate porn star cover-up cases, two separate bribe cases. Ridiculous. Also, going to pause real quick to say, Catherine Wolf, hello there. And Eliel, it's good to be constantly reminded of Trump's crimes until he and his GOP conspirators are brought to justice. Hell yes. I wholeheartedly agree with you. In fact, that is the purpose of today's stream. Let's put it all on the record. Let's look at all of it together.
Determined she was truthful.
Here's the rest of
Michael
the
Avenatti telling NBC News they paid $25,000 for the video.
We caught wind of the fact that there were a number of third parties, some in the mainstream media, that were attempting to purchase the video and the file for use in what I will describe as nefarious activities.
The exam was requested by Life and Style magazine, which interviewed Daniels about her alleged 2006 affair with Mr. Trump. When Daniels was asked if she had unprotected sex with Donald Trump, she answered yes. The White House has repeatedly called those claims false.
He's denied all of these allegations.
And in a third case, a defamation battle by former Apprentice contestant Summer Zervos, today a New York judge ruled the case can go forward and denied the Trump lawyer's request for immunity. Mr. Trump's lawyers had argued he deserved immunity for being commander-in-chief. Zervos says Mr. Trump groped her in 2007. As a candidate, Trump repeatedly denied her claims and those of other women who accused him of misconduct.
They are all false. They're totally invented, fiction, all.
No word from the White House tonight, but Stormy Daniels is tweeting saying the president lied about their relationship, bullied her, broke laws, and she insists, quote, "I'm not going anywhere." And a controversy of a very different kind, the president getting criticized for congratulating Russian President Vladimir Putin on his re-election that many say was fraudulent and for failing to press Putin on election meddling.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch.
So, clearly, the guy has committed a ton of crimes, most of which are not getting investigated. There is so much work being done to drag our feet. It makes me wonder what would have happened if we put that effort into actually, this is a crazy thought, but actually investigating the son of a gun. Let's jump ahead. Here's a big chunk, massive chunk, 2015 through 2017 of crimes. Now we start getting into this area. We could still do something about this. Destruction of presidential records. The willful destruction of government property. This pertains to destruction of presidential records during the period that Trump was president. It appears that this guy regularly destroyed documents. If you recall the stories of him flushing documents, him tearing them up, Mark Meadows burning documents while he was chief of staff, all of that, 2017 through 2021, also known as, God willing, the entirety of Trump's presidency. It continues. Destruction of presidential records. It's uncertain, the investigation status of this. We don't know if the Department of Justice is actually doing anything about this. A grand jury has been investigating Records Act offenses committed after Trump left office, but we don't know, as in it's unclear, whether it will be investigating potential offenses committed while he was still president. Given the Department of Justice's history, remember that picture at the beginning of all presidents from Nixon till now, GOP presidents, they don't enjoy doing their jobs. If it's not a black guy with an ounce of weed in a baggie, they enjoy doing their jobs then. They don't enjoy doing it if it's a white guy with a suit in the Oval Office. Then they can't be bothered. We have until 2026, depending on when the documents were destroyed. But every day that goes by, the statute of limitations passes on more of these offenses. 2022 is when we stopped being able to investigate all of it. That's got a nice green section there, but it should be orange because we are losing time. Now we start getting into good old-fashioned betraying the country. Obstruction of the Russia and Special Counsel investigations. Aiding Michael Cohen's false statements to Congress. That's obstruction of justice. And that's witness tampering. The investigation closed while Trump was still president. Bill Barr, you may recall, was his attorney general. Bill Barr was a henchman for Trump. Of course it was closed while he was in office, while Trump was still president. Why was that not reopened immediately? Well, 2022 passed. if the conduct is treated as an independent event, we have until next year to get an indictment. You want to know why I'm saying I'm pressing on the gas with Merrick Garland? I'm saying we need to get this done now because we are losing the ability to charge these crimes. There is such a thing as taking too long. And I fully believe Merrick Garland is hoping to let the statute of limitations pass on most of these, so he does not have to do his job because he does not want to do his job because he is not worthy of the job he has. 2022, if the conduct is treated as an independent event, or 2024, the deadline, if the conduct is considered to be part of a series of continuing wrongs or conspiracy. In other words, it gets harder to charge the longer we wait. Let us not wait. Let us get charges now. Merrick Garland, where are you? Obstruction of the Russia and special counsel investigations, influencing the cooperation of Michael Flynn. You know, the traitor general, the guy that couldn't be bothered, was unwilling to say. In fact, pled the fifth when he was asked if he supports the peaceful transfer of power. Michael Flynn pled the fifth, meaning he believes that his answer to whether or not he supports the peaceful transfer of power could be used against him in a court of law. He might incriminate himself for a crime if he were to answer that question. Shouldn't be a difficult question for a former general in the U.S. military to answer. Influencing the cooperation of former General Michael Flynn, a witness in the special counsel investigation. The investigation was closed while Trump was president, and just like before, every day that goes by, we lose. It gets harder. It gets harder to charge that crime. It's more difficult to make the case. And it continues. Corruptly obstructing for all this, the special counsel investigation, corruptly instructing or impeding the investigation of Michael Flynn. He obstructed an investigation into a former general that could have been working with another country against the United States. That is a big damn deal. That requires action from the Justice Department. We have not done it. Corruptly obstructing or impeding the FBI's Russia investigation by firing FBI Director James Comey. That investigation closed while in office. It's the same for all of these. Going down. Corruptly obstructing or impeding the special counsel investigation by attempting to curtail the special counsel's investigation. Corruptly obstructing or impeding the FBI's Russia investigation by trying to influence FBI Director Comey's announcement of the investigation. Corruptly obstructing or impeding the special counsel investigation by attempting to fire special counsel Mueller. All of those. We don't even, to our knowledge, there is no investigation happening. There is nothing preventing Merrick Garland from reopening those investigations. He has an obligation to. Not just the ability to. He has an obligation to. You know what? Let's have a gander. Here's Glenn Kirshner discussing this very issue. Trump's attempt to obstruct the Durham Barr investigation. And now we have the benefit of seeing what was going on with Durham and Barr during that time. This is the investigation that was closed. These are the people that Merrick Garland says their opinion's good enough. He's not going to reopen their investigation.
So friends, remember the John Durham investigation? That's the one where Bill Barr appointed this guy, John Durham, as a special counsel to investigate the investigators who investigated Donald Trump. Well, the New York Times just pulled back the curtain on the Durham investigation, and what we see behind that curtain is ugly. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Specifically by investigative journalists Katie Benner, Adam Goldman, and Charlie Savage.
Excellent work
about
from them.
the John Durham investigation. You recall the one. Donald Trump was really angry about the Bob Mueller investigation into the coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russians, an investigation that revealed more than 140 contacts between Trump campaign officials and Russians, an investigation that meticulously detailed and documented multiple counts of obstruction of justice by Donald Trump, and Donald Trump didn't like it one bit. So what did he do? He convinced his then Attorney General Bill Barr to appoint a special counsel to investigate the investigators that had investigated him and documented all that dirt. Specifically, Bill Barr's mandate was to try to undermine the origins of the Trump-Russia investigation. Well, now, the New York Times has pulled the curtain back on the John Durham investigation of the investigators, and boy, it's ugly behind that curtain.
Just to be clear, the fact that you and I are aware of this, the fact that you and I know that Bill Barr's purpose there was specifically to obstruct the investigation, means that Merrick Garland has had the opportunity to know it for years. He had the opportunity to know it. He had access to the necessary records, or would have known that records he should have access to are missing. He's had that for years. He was hoping we were too ignorant to do anything about it. That is what we have right now, holding these people accountable. In other words, nothing. He is assisting in the cover-up.
Here is some of that new reporting by the New York Times.
Hit us, Glenn.
Headline, How Barr's Quest to Find Flaws in the Russia Inquiry Unraveled. The review by John Durham at one point veered into a criminal investigation related to Donald Trump himself, even as it failed to find wrongdoing in the origins of the Russia inquiry. And that article begins, It became a regular litany of grievances from President Donald Trump and his supporters. The investigation into his 2016 campaign's ties to Russia was a witch hunt, they maintained, that had been opened without any solid basis, went on too long, and found no proof of collusion. Egged on by Mr. Trump, Attorney General William Barr set out in 2019 to dig into their shared theory that the Russia investigation likely stemmed from a conspiracy by intelligence or law enforcement agencies. To lead the inquiry, Mr. Barr turned to a hard-nosed prosecutor named John Durham and later granted him special counsel status.
Just to be clear about what we're seeing here. So Trump starts an investigation, rather Trump's Justice Department starts an investigation into whether or not the Russia talk was just there to harass him. I have no idea why they would think that's a good plan, because on stage he requested that Russia work with him against a political opponent. On stage, he said, Russia, if you're listening, release those emails. And then they did. They did indeed hack Hillary Clinton.
To carry on.
Point being, that was dumb of him to begin with, and as you'll see, they discover, yeah, there appears to have been some ties between Trump and Russia in the 2016 campaign. His own people discover this. I wonder if they hold him to account for it.
After Mr. Trump left office. But after almost 4 years, far longer than the Russia investigation itself, Mr. Durham's work is coming to an end without uncovering anything like the deep state plot alleged by Mr. Trump and suspected by Mr. Barr. Mr. Trump would repeat.
To be clear, he doesn't just mean without finding a plot. He didn't think he was going to find a plot. Without finding something they could call a plot. Without finding something they could pin on lefties. That is what happened. They didn't find someone who failed to dot an I or cross a T that they could put in prison for the sake of politics. That's what they failed to do. Not actually investigate a crime. Here's where they commit crimes.
Repeatedly portray the Mueller report as having found no collusion with Russia. The reality was more complex. In fact, the report detailed numerous links between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. Indeed, I think it documented more than 140 contacts between the Trump campaign and Russians.
Where was the, I'm shocked, just shocked, dripping with sarcasm, that Durham and Barr didn't indict. Huh. Maybe they left a note for their predecessors. Maybe they said, we have this dumbass policy that means we can't indict a sitting president. But look, you need to open a case into this as soon as Trump is out of office. Surely that's what they said.
And it established both how Moscow had helped to work Mr. Trump win and how his campaign had expected to benefit from the foreign interference.
Illegal.
Plus, as I mentioned, the Mueller report documented multiple instances where Donald Trump obstructed justice. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole parade of horribles cataloged in the New York Times article. It's a lengthy piece, and I urge you to read it for yourself. But there are a few things that jump out, like several prosecutors, senior prosecutors on John Durham's team resigned, quit, left the investigation because of concerns they had about the ethics of the investigation that was being conducted by Durham. One of the prosecutors who quit was a longtime colleague of mine at the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office. His name is Anthony Scarpelli, and I will take Mr. Scarpelli's ethics to the bank every day of the week. And he quit rather than follow what John Durham wanted to do. The article also talked about a former federal prosecutor who left the Department of Justice and became a defense attorney. And he was representing some of the witnesses in the Durham probe. And he said what he saw of the conduct of John Durham, quote, made his head spin. Then the article talked about how the Department of Justice Inspector General had conducted a full investigation into the origins of the Trump-Russia investigation and found it was properly opened. So what does Bill Barr do? He tries to undermine the results, the conclusion of the Department of Justice Inspector General's investigation. Why? Because it didn't comport with where he wanted things to go, and more importantly, where Donald Trump wanted things to go. I'm not going to continue to catalog the entire parade of horribles laid out in the New York Times article, but friends, I want to focus on one horrible in particular.
Before he gets to that, let me just stress, we have until, at the maximum, we have until 2024 to get charges on this. So where the hell is Merrick Garland? Are they talking about indicting Barr? Durham? Where the hell's Merrick Garland? Where the hell's our Justice Department? We have until 2024.
And in the New York Times piece, you can find it under the heading of an awkward tip. Let me set it up. Bill Barr and John Durham were globe-trotting, asking foreign officials if, they had any dirt about the origins of the Trump-Russia investigation, that would comport with the narrative they were looking for. And here is what the article relates in the section titled An Awkward Tip. On one of Mr. Barr and Mr. Durham's trips to Europe, according to people familiar with the matter, Italian officials, while denying any role in setting off the Russia investigation, unexpectedly offered a potentially explosive tip linking Mr. Trump to certain suspected financial crimes. Mr. Barr and Mr. Durham decided that the tip was too serious and credible to ignore. But rather than assign it to another prosecutor, which is what should have been done, Mr. Barr had Mr. Durham investigate the matter himself, giving him criminal prosecution powers for the first time, even though the possible wrongdoing by Mr. Trump did not fall squarely within Mr. Durham's assignment to scrutinize the origins of the Russia inquiry.
But Durham was a stooge. He was not there to get justice. He was there to work a political operation for Donald Trump. This requires action. We have until 2024. Link in the description. Contact the DOJ. I'm awful salty this Saturday because time's running out. January, February, we're into what? We're eyeballing March of 2023. Months are ticking by. We got a few more. We got a finite amount of time to get this done. If Garland comes in front of the podium, taps the microphone, and says, look, there's too much crime here. I need more resources. Then we'll give them to him. There is no excuse that the head of the American Justice Department can't get this done. If he's saying we can't get this done, then he is saying there is too much crime for America to be able to investigate. I don't buy that for a moment. If this was a guy with the last name Sanchez and the crime involved a conspiracy to ship drugs into the country, you better believe we'd be all over it. We'd be hiring people just to work on this case. That's what we should be doing for this guy. Forget for a moment, America, that it is a white man. Forget for a moment that it's a guy that wears suits and was on TV once. Forget that. Look at the crimes. Do they bear investigation? Hell yes, they do.
The people said. Mr. Durham, after investigating something he should not have been investigating, Mr. Durham never filed charges. And it remains unclear what level of an investigation it was, what steps he took, what he learned, and whether anyone at the White House ever found out. The extraordinary fact that Mr. Durham opened a criminal investigation that included scrutinizing Mr. Trump has remained secret until it was unearthed by those investigative reporters. Let me name them again: Katie Benner, Adam Goldman, and Charlie Savage of the New York Times. But let me just recap that, friends. So Durham had a mandate to investigate the origins of the Trump-Russia investigation. That was his jurisdiction. That was his authority. And Barr and Durham together went globe-trotting, looking for the kind of evidence and information that would support their narrative, that would give Mr. Trump what he wanted, evidence that the Trump-Russia investigation never should have been opened in the first place. There was no such evidence because it was properly opened, and it bore fruit. While they were globe-trotting, meeting with Italian government officials, those government officials said, I can't help you on the origins of the Trump-Russia investigation, but we do have evidence of financial crimes by Donald Trump. At that point, what should have happened was a prosecutor, not Mr. Durham, who had a narrow jurisdictional mandate about what he was supposed to be investigating, another DOJ prosecutor or team should have been assigned to follow up on the information, the awkward tip presented by the Italian government officials. That's not what Bill Barr did. No, he said to John Durham, why don't you just look into this one yourself? And it was serious, they said. They even opened a criminal investigation into this allegation of financial crimes by Donald Trump. And then it got buried. We know nothing about it. We don't know whether charges should have been brought but were killed by some combination of Durham and Bill Barr. We have no idea what happened. We do know that wasn't John Durham's to investigate in the first place, given his jurisdictional mandate, what he was supposed to be looking at. The whole thing stinks, to use a legal term, friends.
Yes, sir.
So I suspect this is just one of the first big old shoes to drop about what was going on in this Durham investigation. Let me finish with this, though, friends. What we do know is that when this whole attempt to undermine the Trump-Russia investigation failed, what did Durham do? Well, then he kind of shifted focus over to the Hillary Clinton campaign. Yeah, maybe they were the ones who were, putting disinformation in the mix about Donald Trump. Maybe they were the ones that we should investigate. And remember, when Durham went down that second path, he actually brought charges against not one but two people. And he took those people to trial, and he failed miserably. In fact, some of the prosecutors walked off the investigation because they didn't even believe those cases should be brought to trial.
John Durham should be under investigation himself for his actions. That is an absolute corruption of our justice system. Trump, Barr, and Durham all have to be investigated. They ought to be indicted from what I can see here in this New York Times reporting, brought to us by Glenn Kirshner. We have until 2024 to get that done. The clock is ticking. I haven't even heard about it. Being taken up. Let's have a look at some comments before we continue. Andrew Godfrey says, yo, Jake. Hey, Andrew, good to see you. Catherine Wolf says, everything Trump does is projection, right down to having to flush low-pressure toilets over and over. Yeah. Now we know why. Absolutely. Wholeheartedly agreed. So let's look at these crimes, as we are now getting into things with less of a timeline, but it's still there. Attempts to steal the 2020 election. We have until this year, people. We're getting awfully close to the deadline. Soliciting Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to create fraudulent election results. The investigation is active, and it's being done by the district attorney, Fani Willis. That is the level we have to go down to before we find someone who is willing to pursue justice. This is why I encourage you. Pressure your state's attorney general. Link also in the description if you are from one of the 5 fake elector states that currently does not have an investigation going. I need to update my chatting with Dana Nessel. I have contacted her as a constituent for Michigan. But I have not contacted her except to say good job, since she said she has opened an investigation. Well, it's 2023 now. We better hope that investigation's about ready to go to trial. Obstruction of the Russia and Special Counsel investigations. We have until this year. This is for corruptly obstructing the independent Special Counsel investigation by attempting to have Attorney General Sessions take it over. Remember that guy recused himself. More special counsel investigations. Going all the way down. We have until 2023. Oh, yes, influencing of Michael Cohen, a witness in the investigation. Yeah, he really did lean on Cohen. Good news is Cohen has been giving a lot of testimony in court of late. Let's hope some of it involves that. Although, as we see, the investigation appears to be closed. False public financial disclosure reports. Failing to disclose a gift in the form of pro bono services from Rudy Giuliani and an asset, a personal loan to his golf course in Aberdeen, Scotland, on his 2019 public financial disclosure records. Well, we have until 2024. That's right around the corner. There appears to be no active or previous criminal investigations into this. More false public financial disclosure reports. Failing to disclose a gift. Yada yada. Aberdeen. Yada yada. That's for the criminal violations of the Ethics in Government Act. Obstruction. Once again, of the Russian Special Counsel investigations. This was for influencing the cooperation of Roger Stone, a witness. It appears that investigation was also closed. Attempting to get Ukraine to interfere with the 2020 election. Folks, if you don't recall this, because now we see Zelensky only in the current context as this brave president who is fighting foreign invaders. Why did Russia suddenly feel like they could get away with this? Why'd they feel like now was the time to attack? Maybe it's because they saw our president corruptly seeking public statements from the president of Ukraine that would help President Trump win re-election in return for official actions, namely a White House visit between the two leaders and the release of U.S. security assistance to Ukraine. In other words, the Javelin missiles, to hold off Russian tanks. That's bribery, and we have until 2024 to do anything about it. But no reports of an active or previous investigation exist. And then again, causing attempts to get Ukraine to interfere in the 2020 election, causing, personally and through a subordinate, federal officials to engage in partisan political conduct by involving them in a plot to pressure a foreign country to investigate Trump's campaign rival. Remember, he wanted to get Burisma and Hunter Biden's whatever business he had in Ukraine. He wanted that to be investigated as some sort of a corrupt thing. He wanted Zelensky to make a big announcement that they were doing an investigation into the son of his campaign rival. Let's have a look real quick. Ali Velshi, on the 1-year anniversary of Russia invading Ukraine, he talked about this, and I want you to remember that we have until, let's look at this specifically. We have until 2024 to do anything about this. Think about all of the dead folks in Ukraine. Remember that there are people who will never see their families again. There are people still buried under rubble. There are bodies in the streets. Here's Ali Velshi telling you why that had to happen, apparently.
I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be.
If you watched that moment play out back in July of 2018 and thought to yourself, this isn't going to end well, you were correct. After spending a couple of hours with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, the former president, Donald Trump, arrived at the conclusion that Vladimir Putin did not interfere with the 2016 U.S. presidential election because he said so. Donald Trump publicly sided with the Russian autocrat over U.S. intelligence agencies, which had already concluded that Russia was, in fact, behind the effort to tip the scale in Trump's favor in 2016. Donald Trump did try and walk those comments back a full 24 hours later, saying that he misspoke. But the damage was already done, and we didn't know it at the time. But there was another scenario playing out behind the scenes. A discredited rumor being spread by Republican allies, Trump advisors, and the president himself. What if it actually was Ukraine that meddled in the 2016 U.S. election and not Russia? Almost 1 year to the day after Trump defended Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, Trump had what he later described as a perfect phone call with the new leader of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky was a popular actor. He was a comedian who had run a populist campaign against years and years of political corruption in Ukraine's government. The Ukrainian people had launched 2 revolutions in the space of a decade, trying to get themselves a political system that worked, one that wasn't beset by corruption. The election of this young, charismatic populist leader felt like a real opportunity for some Ukrainians. Putin, though, saw his own opportunity. He saw Zelensky as weak, as inexperienced, as being in over his head, the perfect scenario to further squeeze Ukraine, which had been increasingly leaning toward Europe and the West and away from Russia. In this moment, what Ukraine really needed was its biggest and strongest partner, the United States, to step up and say that Ukraine and its new president had the full backing, respect, and support of the United States, something that had near universal support in the U.S. Congress.
I want to point out those folks walking through the background. How often do you see people in the USA, in England, in France? How often do you see them walking around with backpacks? I do wonder how much of a person's personal items they have to carry with them when their country is being actively invaded. Just a thought.
Instead, what Ukraine got was a lying, scheming, double-crossing U.S. president who was prepared to defy U.S. interests and policy in favor of personal political gain. And what Trump and his allies did was push that conspiracy theory about Ukraine interfering in the 2016 election. And then came that infamous phone call, which was, if it isn't already obvious, far from perfect. On July 25, 2019, Donald Trump and the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, shared a phone call. According to transcripts, Zelensky told Trump, quote, "We are ready to continue to cooperate for the next steps. Specifically, we are almost ready to buy more javelins from the United States for defense purposes," end quote. To which Donald Trump,
just in case you don't know, this is before Russia invades. Russia in 2014, and look, if you're a lefty, God help us, because that's when Obama was in office, when he was watching. Russia in 2014 already invaded, already took over a chunk of Ukraine with physical force in the 21st century. They already did that. That's when people say Crimea, that's not a separate country. That is part of Ukraine that got invaded. Here is Zelensky, knowing damn well what Putin's up to, knowing, most likely having foreknowledge through his own intelligence, as in his intelligence network, that Putin has eyes on taking over the rest of it. He is telling the U.S. president, all right, we're ready to buy more Javelin missiles. The Javelin is a missile that a ground troop can use to blow up a tank, to blow up a helicopter, to fight back against superior military equipment, people who are not ground troops, units that are a crew operating machine. That's what Zelensky is trying to get. He wants those javelins so that Russia has to think twice about an invasion. And here is Trump using that to extort him. We have until 2024 to indict this guy.
Responded, quote, "I would like you to do us a favor, though. I would like you to do us a favor, though. Trump made $400 million in congressionally approved military aid to Ukraine contingent upon Zelensky doing Trump a favor by announcing investigations into his political rival, Joe Biden, and his son. Trump temporarily froze congressionally approved military aid to Ukraine to pressure Zelensky. All of this, of course, resulted in Donald Trump's first impeachment. And the only reason we even know about this phone call is because of a select few truth tellers inside the Trump administration, specifically the Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. Vindman, a national security advisor, blew the whistle and testified in Trump's impeachment trial that he heard that call. He knew it was wrong, and he reported it up the chain.
I was concerned by the call. What I heard was inappropriate, and I reported my concerns to Mr. Eisenberg. It is improper for the President of the United States to demand a foreign government investigate a U.S. citizen and a political opponent.
Vindman was promptly removed from his post after Trump's impeachment trial. Anyone with an ounce of foresight could predict. I would like you to do us a favor, though, was not going to end well. For Trump, he was impeached by the House, but ultimately faced zero repercussions. For Ukraine, the consequences were far more serious. Ukraine and its new, untested, uncorrupt leader needed to be taken seriously on the world stage in order to fend off Russian aggression. Instead, Donald Trump chose to try and leverage the situation for his own personal gain. And for President Zelensky, having that military aid frozen, having the President of the United States try to shake him down, that cost Zelensky in terms of power and respect and his authority against Vladimir Putin. After a year of warfare against Russia, Volodymyr Zelensky has proved that he is a strong and capable president and a military leader. But he started this war on shaky ground that Russia saw as an opportunity to invade because Ukraine didn't appear to have the universal backing of the United States. And that fact is on Donald Trump.
I'm trying to stay kind of chill about this. But boy, MSNBC couldn't have put it better. This is who we are. I realize that's their catchphrase of the month, but let's stick on that for a second. This is who we are until we demonstrate otherwise. We are a country that allows its leaders to get away with this until we demonstrate otherwise. The whole world is watching us right now in horror as we demonstrate that we will let deadline after deadline after deadline pass rather than hold one of our leaders accountable for the crimes they committed in office. You want to know why people curl their lips at us when we're walking around the world? Because we are, when we visit other countries, Americans. Because we walk around in ignorance. Because we choose to ignore things like this. Because the American people are responsible for this by not giving a damn. By not constantly putting pressure on the DOJ. By not writing them an email once a week, every week. By not protesting their inaction, by listening to talking heads who say, well, this is a complicated thing. It takes time to investigate. Mother effer. I just went through 3 pages of past deadlines. 3 pages. Now we are looking at the bottom of page 3 at things that expire next year. It's time to get on it. This patience is dangerous. And we are an international joke. We are not seen as the world's leading democracy. We are seen as the world's leading corrupt state. Most powerful country in the world, but powerless against our own leaders. That is pathetic. And the U.S. public needs to change. You, me, we need to stop putting up with this. A fellow Jake, a.k.a. Dank Underwood, says, happy Saturday night from one Jake to another. good to have you here, my friend. Let's look at the crimes that we are most familiar with, because these are the ones that we actually latched onto. In 2020, when we got a new Congress, when we got the power to deal with some of this stuff, thank God we chose to take at least some of it seriously. Let's look up here for a second. Attempt to get Ukraine. Yep, attempt to get Ukraine. Same, attempts to get Ukraine to interfere in the 2020 election. All of this expires in 2024. Pressuring federal officers to use their official positions for partisan politics. Causing subordinate federal officials to violate the Hatch Act by pressuring and encouraging them to engage in partisan political conduct. Where are we with that investigation? Well, it's uncertain. The Office of the Special Counsel issued a report in which it determined that Secretary Pompeo and Acting Secretary Wolf, their violations originated within the White House, or possibly the Trump campaign, or President Trump himself. We don't know who. And that President Trump laid the foundation for these and other Hatch Act violations by refusing to hold officials accountable for even the most flagrant and clear-cut Hatch Act violations. We have until 2025 to get charges, to get an indictment on that, to get the court process going. I sure hope we've done the rest of this by then. I sure hope there is at least a division of the Department of Justice that's put on this. Attempts to steal the 2020 election, in other words, the coup. Making material, false statement, under oath, and or in a Georgia federal court proceeding. That's perjury, and the investigation is active. Attempts to steal the 2020 election, conspiring with others to overturn the results of Georgia's presidential election, and to weaponize the Department of Justice in service of their larger campaign to overturn the results of the 2020 election. That's conspiracy against rights, and that is an active investigation. Good. Thank you, Fawny Willis, a district attorney. Thank you, the current Attorney General of Georgia. Good work. Attempting to steal the 2020 election, depriving Georgia residents of a fair and impartially conducted election process by pressuring the Georgia Secretary of State to falsify or overturn election results. Let's jump past all this Georgia stuff. We know that. We know all this. By state officials, committing. Yep, we have active investigations into all of this. This is why I stress so much that you should put pressure on your state's attorney general if you were in one of the 5 states that had a false elector plot, a fake elector plot, but did not open a state investigation into it. Because who's doing this? Let's look at the investigation status and all this Georgia stuff. Active, a special grand jury has been convened in Fulton County, Georgia. But it is not clear precisely what criminal offenses are being investigated. In other words, the states are handling this, or rather the state of Georgia is handling this. Forming an agreement with others, including Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. Yep, same thing. Georgia, Governor Kemp, Georgia. Let's see. Attempting to steal the 2020 election. Soliciting Francis Watson, Georgia. All right. Attempting to steal the 2020 election. Attempting to obstruct and or obstruction. Wow. For a time, and or obstructing for a time Congress's certification of the 2020 presidential election. Before we move on to January 6th, which is what they're talking about, which we have until, by the way, 2026 to charge, which would be 2 years after the next election in which Trump is running, by the way. Let's just remind ourselves that we just saw all of those charges relating to one state, Georgia. There are 6 other states: Michigan, Arizona, New Mexico, yada, yada, yada. There are 6 other states with a fake elector plot involved in them. In fact, yeah, let's do it. There's 6 other states with a fake elector plot. These are this right here: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, New Mexico, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. I noticed that their big list of 56 crimes doesn't even include those. But I'll tell you what, the January 6th report, it makes it very clear that the fake elector plot happened in all of these states. Where's the investigation? Is the Department of Justice looking into this? We don't know. We got an election coming up. I sure would appreciate a little heads up as to whether or not we have to worry about whether or not this will even be accounted for. What about all the people on the state level from the state GOP parties that lied and said they were the true electors, even though they weren't? In Michigan, on December 14th, the police in the building had to prevent Republican electors from sneaking in to the state capitol. Their plan was literally to camp out overnight. How organized was that? Who told them to do that? January 6th committee says Rudy Giuliani told them to do that on the instructions of Donald Trump. Where are the charges? To be clear about what we're talking about, here is MSNBC talking about the New York Times timeline of the January 6th attack, wherein multiple people died, where we have still have not seen a conviction, even an indictment, other than for the peons on the ground floor.
6 months after the breach of the Capitol, the clearest picture we have of what actually happened comes from this incredible New York Times video investigation. It takes us through the events of January 6th moment by moment. It shows exactly how the insurrectionists got inside the building.
The Capitol is now surrounded. Rioters haven't made it inside yet, but around the time that the mob on the east pushed forward, rioters on the west were making a pivotal move. This scaffolding was erected for the upcoming inauguration of Joe Biden. It covers a staircase that gives direct access to an upper level, and dozens of doors and windows. 3 police lines guard that route. But at ground level, officers are so overwhelmed that just a few cover this crucial access point. Several Proud Boys see the weakness.
These are real stairs. Scattered over here. Stairs are right there. Head over.
Proud Boys start fighting the police, and with others in the mob, they push through the line.
As we would later learn after this report came out, that is what the Proud Boys were there to do. They discussed it beforehand. They had been working with someone, we don't know who, someone higher up. They had planned the specifics of this. They were looking for points of ingress. And their stated purpose, what they said they were there to do, was to direct the crowd into the building through these points of ingress. There they are doing it on camera. What I'm showing you now came out years ago. Came out in 2021. We're in 2022 now, so I guess year plus ago. Then the January 6th report came out found out, yeah, the Proud Boys were planning this. Now the Proud Boys are in trial. Who have they subpoenaed to testify at their trial? They subpoenaed Donald Trump to testify in their trial. Will that subpoena get enforced? Will Trump be allowed to dodge it again? Where is the charges for Trump in this? Where are the charges for Eastman? Where are the charges for Rudy Giuliani? I don't see them. I do not see them. Instead, I see Trump saying that he's going to run in 2024. Folks, that's next year. Do not have patience about this. This is not something to be patient about. This is a disgrace. This is an attack on our country by those pricks right there and the people who ordered them to do it. Find them. Indict them. Put them behind bars. No ankle monitor nonsense. Put these pricks in prison. I don't care if we need a Secret Service guy to hang out outside the jail cell reading To Kill a Mockingbird over and over. I don't care. This needs to be dealt with. This was an attack on our country. That is a coup. We need to arrest the coup plotters.
Over several minutes, it's a brutal fight on these steps. At one point, the rioters are held back. But they make a final push up the flight of stairs. At the top, they scuffle again with a small group of officers who give in after barely a minute. The mob now has direct access to Capitol entrances.
You see the frustration in that officer's face? Look at him. There's a man realizing that he has been given no backup, and that no backup appears to be coming. That's a man realizing he has been put in a position to lose. I don't even hear us talking about an investigation into why there were so many warnings ahead of time, which again, thank you, January 6th committee. We know there were. And yet, there was a handful of officers there to stop this from happening. It's almost like they did not want to stop this from happening, and they were willing to sacrifice those guys to let it happen. There's a guy realizing that in the moment. And that's what he does.
The mob now has direct access to Capitol entrances.
Because what's he going to do? Without America there backing him up, without the wave of police officers, soldiers that would have been called if left-wingers tried something like this. Without that, what's he going to do? He's going to get trampled to death by the mob. That's what he's going to do. So he leaves. We don't have justice in this country until we deal with this.
I can't believe this is reality. We accomplished this.
And hundreds more protesters below surge forward.
Let's go! Seize the arms!
It's a coup.
It's utter mayhem, and it's about to get worse. The scene is being filmed from countless angles, allowing us to piece together, moment by moment, what comes next. Proud Boy Dominic Pizzola uses a police shield he stole to bash in a window. And at 2:13 p.m., the Capitol is breached. Michael Sparks, a Trump supporter from Kentucky.
Watch what he does, Michael Sparks, first guy in. Watch what he does as soon as he gets in, because he thinks there's going to be a certain reaction to breaking into the Capitol building. He thinks the police are going to do something. He has an expectation. Watch what his expectation
is the first person inside.
He throws his hands up. Don't shoot, don't shoot, don't shoot. That's what he thinks would happen to somebody who broke into the Capitol building when the election is being certified. Before January 6, 2021, what did you think would happen if somebody tried this? Get mowed down by gunfire, right? That's what I would have assumed. He thought the same thing when he did it. He thought, oh God, here's cops. I'm doing the thing. I better throw my hands up. Surrender right away.
A police officer seems unsure of what to do.
A police officer seems unsure of what to do. There's a white man with his hands up. There's a Republican. There's a conservative. How do I handle conservatives?
Backs off. Sparks is followed by...
He lets him. Could have pulled out his gun and unloaded on the guy. I wonder if those people would have poured in as well. But they're not trained to do that. This isn't a black kid getting a parking ticket, so he doesn't know if he can shoot or not. That's the country we live in.
Proud Boys and other far-right extremists. One carrying a Confederate flag.
Confederate flag. Traitors to our country. Disrupting democracy in the United States. No indictments for those who organized this.
Another armed with...
None so far.
A baseball bat. When rioters break open the locked doors, hundreds more rush in.
They let them in. Because the signals they got from their country were that this is the right of conservatives. Conservatives can do whatever they want. The law doesn't apply to conservatives. So you don't touch conservatives. All that brutality we trained you to do, that's for lefties. That's for people of color. Never, ever conservatives. And certainly not the people who give conservative wackos their orders. Certainly never.
One of the lead reporters of that incredible piece, which you really, really have to watch, Evan Hill, of the New York Times Visual Investigations team, joins me now. Evan, first of all, it's exceptional work. I don't even quite understand how it exists. So maybe first just describe to me, how were you able, it feels like there was a documentary film crew that had deployed to film this, but that's...
I'll take that question. Thanks, Chris. The answer is... They were so sure there would be no repercussions that they filmed themselves doing the crime, and they bragged about it on social media. And what they failed to understand, highlighting what is wrong with MAGA, highlighting why MAGA will stay on tenaciously for a while yet, and yet will more and more begin to fight with the GOP. What happened, and I'm going to leave their dumb faces for this because I don't think they come out and say this, they didn't realize that they're not in the right economic class. They knew they were in the right racial class. They knew they were in the right political class. But for immunity, no, they're not in the right economic class. So when it came time for punishment, when we insisted, when the American people made it clear that we would not let this go, they are the ones that took the heat. Should they be getting the prison sentences they're getting? Yeah. But not them alone. We need the people that sent them there as well. And the time is running out to do that.
Not what happened. How did you get all this footage and then put it together?
Because they were not afraid of prosecution. They believed that the law didn't apply to them, and they were mostly correct. It was because we insisted that anything has been done at all.
I think that what you said is true. It feels like we did have a documentary film crew there, and we called it the most well-filmed, well-documented insurrection in history. And we were just able to take advantage of the hundreds of different phones, rioters, insurrectionists filming themselves in real time from hundreds of different perspectives. That amount of information actually was almost too much for us. And one of the big heaves of this project was, how do we organize and put all of these pieces of footage together? And that documenting that and spreadsheeting that and logging it according to the time and where it was filmed was half of this project, if not more. And then, of course, we had to start putting together a narrative of how this actually occurred.
One thing that becomes clear in your documentary that wasn't clear to me before is that there really is a relatively small, organized cadre of folks, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, who are at every key moment instigating and penetrating these defenses, and then that sort of swells the mob forward, who then get kind of imbued with this kind of, lust for conflict or whatever, but that they're instigating in almost every key moment.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think that the makeup of the mob was one of the interesting aspects of this investigation, which was that, yes, there were very well-organized right-wing extremist groups in this crowd, at the key moments, pushing forward, identifying locations in the police line that were weak, stealing police shields, but that actually the majority of the mob was made up of, for lack of a better word, radicalized Trump supporters acting individually or making decisions individually, but then becoming part of a mob and being rallied by extremist groups such as the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, 3%ers.
As usual, any hope we have, as it currently stands, of this actually resulting in criminal consequences for the people who arranged it are from conservatives infighting. The Proud Boys subpoenaing Donald Trump, for example. That is how we get this. The January 6th committee, some of their best work done by the Republicans on it. It is Republican infighting. And the only people who the Justice Department seems to respect or take seriously are right-wingers. Why is that? Because Democrats have not insisted. Democrats haven't made a big deal about these things. Democrats constantly run defense for these sons of bitches. Why? Most Democrats are not truly left. Most Democrats are corporate Democrats. They care only about keeping things civil, keeping things quiet, so that corporations can go on bleeding America. That's what they care about. I'm going to pause for a moment and read some comments because we got them building up. Leon Russo says, where are the insurrection charges for Ginny Thomas and her collaborator husband, Justice Thomas? Correct. In fact, that guy, we need to seriously look at charging that guy because he can't be on the Supreme Court. Mo Brooks, Louis Gohmert, Mark Meadows, Josh Howley, Ted Cruz, perjury, Taylor Greene, well done. Lauren Bobobert, I try to be sex positive, but fair enough. Ron Johnson and half the Republican caucus. Traitors, agreed. Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan, agreed. Traitors, both. It goes on. Roger Stone, Enrique Tarrio, Senator Ron Johnson, Scott Perry, John Eastman, Mo Brooks, Ted Cruz, Peter Navarro, Rupert Murdoch, for that matter, Tucker Carlson, yes. Alex Jones, absolutely. Sidney Powell, Proud Boys, 3%ers, Oath Keepers, Patriot Front, and Fox News in general. In fact, he also adds Paul Gosar. Agreed, 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 agreed. All of them. Every last one of them seems to have broken the law, seems to have tried a coup. I don't care if it's a big list. We need those people to be held to account. And it's that simple. Otherwise, we don't live in a free country. We live in a country where we are at the mercy of Republican whim. And I'm sick of living in that country. I grew up in that country. I'm sick of that country. Dave T says, can't wait to see Tucker's truth revision. Should be a very novel bit of fantasy. Wholeheartedly agreed. He is going to try to flip this on its head. He's going to try to make it seem like that nightmare behind me right now, that was Antifa. That's going to be his pitch. I hope he does that, because the result is going to be that we get to talk about this more in the mainstream media. We might even have another J6. And I hope they shine a light on this, if only accidentally, the fools that they are.
I want to show the footage about Roseanne Boyland, who lost her life on that day. She was overrun,
trampled to death, yeah. Trampled to death by these people that call themselves patriots.
To death, apparently, and I never really understood.
To be fair, the coroner says she died from methamphetamines. I don't frankly trust the coroner. I have good reason not to, and that is we just saw what happened, and we're still waiting for the organizers to be charged. I do not trust our Justice Department, nor should you. We should hold them up skeptically until they demonstrate that they're willing to do their jobs. Let's let our man say his piece.
Understood what happened to her until this section of the documentary that you put together. Take a listen.
Roseanne Boyland, a Trump supporter who has been swept up by QAnon conspiracies, is moving toward the door. But amid the scrum, she collapses and is lying unconscious beneath the mob. As the crowd sarcastically chants a Black Lives Matter slogan, Boyland's friend, Justin Winchell, tries to pull her to safety.
They were chanting the words George Floyd said as he was being murdered by Derek Chauvin and others. They chanted those words. Well, they were trampling one of their own. I cannot imagine a better piece of symbolism for what these people are.
He screams for help. But instead, fellow rioters trample over Boyland and charge at the police again. Boyland
trampling over one of their own in order to maul the police so that they can interrupt an election, so that they can have a coup against democracy. That's us, folks.
Will be pronounced dead at a local hospital in the evening.
I found that so profoundly upsetting to see her friend there sort of yelling for help, and also understanding the utter chaos and mayhem that would lead to that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I worked on that one, and it was one of the most upsetting things that I had to watch during this investigation. And you can imagine we saw hundreds of hours of pretty disturbing footage. Roseanne Boyland was a 34-year-old from Georgia who had gotten into QAnon and gone to the Capitol. And you can see her there kind of just getting sucked into that tunnel, which became one of the worst scenes of violence that day. And when she emerged, she was unconscious. The medical examiner's office said that she died of a amphetamine overdose, and we investigated that as well. But clearly, I think the conditions of that mob contributed to it, and her fellow rioters really showed no effort to stop their attack on police while she was lying there on the ground.
Well, it'll probably help if I turn the mic on. Don't forget that we have this point now. Trump got almost $250 million following that fiasco. Following on those same election lies, he got almost $250 million. Sound off. Yes, thank you. It's back on now. Got almost $250 million to continue fighting the election lies. The only election lies were the ones he told. He swindled $250 million out of his people following that disaster at the Capitol. $250 million. News outlets have reported that at least one federal grand jury has been investigating aspects of the January 6th attack, including the planning of the Stop the Steal protests, schemes to submit false electors from yada, 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 and financing of the protests. However, it is not clear what specific crimes are being investigated. Well, here is one that they ought to. Wire fraud to the tune of $250 million. The unlawful possession. Now we get into our even more modern day. The unlawful possession of government records after he was forced to leave the office. He had to be forced to leave. He did not accept the peaceful transfer of power. He had to be forced out. After he was forced out of office, he took government records with him. Let's look at, and I'll get my mic correct this time. So let's look at Bo of the Fifth Column, breaking down specifically what this was. Because when I hear it reported, as Bo says, this is one of the few times where the seriousness is understated by the media. Here he is telling us quickly what it is.
Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So today we are going to talk about the ongoing saga related to the former President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and his adventures and misadventures with the Department of Justice. Recently, the Department of Justice searched his home. The speculation was that it was about an attempt to find some documents. His allies said that this was baseless. Okay? Reporting is now suggesting that among the documents recovered at his home during the search include documents that had the label TSSCI. We will get to what that means in a minute. Now, that is in addition to other classified documents, but we're just going to focus on that one when we talk about it. It is also being reported that the warrant indicates that one of the violations that the Department of Justice may be looking into is a violation of the Espionage Act. So, TSSCI. The media is going to be talking about classifications all day, I'm sure.
Just want to clarify before it goes in, Trump has since admitted in one form or another, including on his own effing social media platform, the one he paid for, he has admitted to all of this. It was in the form of defenses, often changing his story, but he admitted that he took these documents.
This will be the one time the media understates something. They'll go through the various types. What you need to know is that TS, top secret. Okay, this is incredibly sensitive material to begin with. SCI is kind of a modifier. Sensitive, compartmented information. This is a batch of secrets that is so top secret they can only be viewed in a room specifically designed to protect secrets. There are a lot of formers on social media, former military, former intelligence, and they're making these statements about, what would happen if I had done this? First, let's be real. You would never be able to do this. There are too many safeguards in place to stop you. This wouldn't happen. And if it did, it would be something that was very intentional and required a lot of work. But the statements to me, they're cute. They're funny. Because it's stuff like, if I did this, they would have already arrested me. No, if you did this, you'd be in the basement somewhere being interrogated until you talked. And they would not hold anything back. I'd be looking at 10 to 20. Now, if you took SCI documents and were given the opportunity to return them, elected not to, and, went about your day possibly meeting with foreign nationals. No.
Elected not to. Remember, that's the operative point. He knew he had them. He chose not to give them back. In fact, he refused to give them back. He tried to negotiate with the U.S. government about the conditions in which he might give them back. What would happen, Bo, if anybody else did that? What would happen to them? 10 to 20, you say?
You wouldn't be looking at 10 to 20. 10 to 20 would be what the groundskeeper tells your family when they go to visit you. Row 10, plot 20. There's no way.
That is how serious these documents are.
That the media is going to frame this properly. These are big secrets. Now, the president, former president, is now saying that these documents were declassified. He declassified them before he left office. Okay, maybe, sure, that's possible. It's worth noting that process doesn't just happen because the president thinks it does. It's not just something that he can think, oh, well, these are no longer classified. It doesn't work like that. His allies, who called this baseless, who called the search baseless, and said it was a political job and all of this stuff and riled up people, they need to take a look at themselves right now, and you need to figure out where you want to be, because this is serious. This isn't a joke. These are documents related to national security. This is stuff spy movies are based on. If you choose to stand beside this man politically after this, you never get to talk about supporting the troops again because you're putting them at risk. You never get to talk about wanting a strong country again because you're weakening it.
True. From Bo. He goes on, link in the description. Folks, thank you for telling me when my mic was off. I can't stress enough, I will do that frequently. One hopes I catch it quickly. Let's wrap this up. Wrap it up. You get the sense this guy has no respect at all for legality. He has no respect for democracy. He has no respect for the office. He has no respect for you. He doesn't care about who you say president should be. He doesn't care who you say the president should not be. If he can steal from you, he will. This list did not include corruption charges regarding his using of his own hotels to host foreign dignitaries as they came to do business with the United States. Not Trump, the United States. This list does not include a hell of a lot of things, and yet it's got 56 items on it, none of which Trump has been indicted for, many of which the deadline for an indictment has come and gone. We have failed. Every red bar on this list is a disgrace that America will have to bear for the rest of its history. Every single one. We need to stop it. We need those green bars to stay green, and they need to be changed to conviction achieved. For the rest of these, it's the same. Unlawful possession, yada, yada, except the very last one. We have another campaign finance crime and cover-up. This dealing, again, with Michael Cohen. This being under New York. But the statute of limitations has likely been told beyond the 2021 deadline. It's entirely possible that we will never get justice for that one either. What is still possible on there is plenty. But we need to kill this narrative that I keep hearing from all kinds of people that want to seem reasonable They want to seem like they're reasonable and, oh, they know what they're talking about. We need to kill this narrative that would have us sitting on our hands, that would allow us to give the Justice Department years and years and years to investigate crimes for which the deadline will pass. They've already demonstrated they're willing to let a lot of these go. They have not demonstrated that they are willing to go after any of these beyond the special counsel, Jack Smith, his recent work. Got another video there. It's about Jack Smith's current investigation. The good news is, it does appear that Jack Smith is actually doing his job, and good for him. But I want you to remember that none of this matters if Garland doesn't pull the trigger. All Jack Smith can do is give his recommendation to Merrick Garland, and Merrick Garland has demonstrated that he does not give a damn about justice. He doesn't care. He's a politician. And that's a job for a lawman, Attorney General. The job for someone who has an interest in justice. Merrick Garland does not have it. I hope he is fired, frankly. And I hope he redeems himself before he is fired. No matter what happens, for the record, from this point on, no matter what happens, I hope Merrick Garland is fired. He's earned it because he gave Trump a pass on a litany of crimes. But before that happens, I do hope that Jack Smith returns to him with a clear case and that he signs off on taking it to trial. Before we go, here's the good news. Here is the legal breakdown with Brian Tyler Cohen and the return of Glenn Kirshner, talking about what Jack Smith has done recently.
You're watching the legal breakdown. So, Glenn, we know that Jack Smith subpoenaed Mike Pence, and Mike Pence has come out and vowed to fight that subpoena. But that's led the special counsel to do something what you've called unheard of in prosecutorial circles. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, Brian, usually when we have a witness we want to put before the grand jury, and the witness has privileges that they want to try to invoke to keep from having to testify before the grand jury, we put them in the grand jury, they testify, and it's a very long, drawn-out process. Jack Smith just turned that on its head. He said, we're not going to go through all that. We're not going to wait. We're not going to drag this out. And he filed a preemptory motion with the Chief Judge Beryl Howell, who has supervisory responsibility over the grand jury. And he said that he wants Judge Beryl Howell to rule up front that Mike Pence has no privileges. Now, this would be like if Jack Smith was a Major League Baseball pitcher and he was striking people out while they were still sitting in the dugout. I mean, before they came out, approached the plate for their at-bat. This is not the way it's ordinarily done. And it tends to show that Jack Smith is going 100 miles an hour in some really unorthodox ways in the direction of justice.
Now, is there any legal benefit to Pence not testifying? Now, I know there's a political benefit to him not testifying because anything that he does to go up, against Trump could be viewed as politically damaging to him since he's still trying to pander to a crowd that wants him hanged. But is there any legal benefit here for him to go forward and try not to comply with this subpoena?
The answer is there really is no legal benefit. Now, here's the only thing I can tease out if I looked at this as an academic exercise. So if Mike Pence goes into the grand jury and he doesn't try to invoke any privilege, instead he just fully, truthfully, and accurately testifies about the crimes of Donald Trump, crimes that he inarguably knows Donald Trump committed because Trump was pressuring him relentlessly to violate the law, to obstruct the official congressional proceedings of certifying Joe Biden's win. So if Mike Pence just decided to go in the grand jury, and forego all possible privileges, executive privilege, this sort of new harebrained scheme that he has to try to claim he's a legislator and invoke speech or debate clause privilege. If he did that, and it turned out he was wrong, well, then he would have violated privileges, and that could come back to haunt him legally. But as I say, Brian, that's more of an academic exercise because I don't think Mike Pence has any viable privileges to invoke.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't. And the fact that the guy that was the target of the hang Mike Pence chants is still trying to play nice with this punk tells you how corrupt our justice system is. He still views it as the safer bet to side with far-right extremists than with anybody interested in upholding the law. He's chasing power. He sees more power in far-right extremism than cooperating with the law. What does that tell you about what the people in power think of our Justice Department? What does that tell you about their outlook on our Justice Department? Tells me they don't think it's very strong. Tells me they think that there is more to be gained by making a mockery of it, by playing games with it rather than cooperating. We should be concerned about that.
So is this kind of thing where he's going to go in and he doesn't want to give an extra inch, because if he gives an extra inch voluntarily without being obligated to do so by the judge, then anything he gives voluntarily, Trump can turn around and basically, jump down his throat for having done that.
He can. But think about this. Let's assume Mike Pence runs this to ground and he invokes every privilege known to man to try to keep from the grand jury incriminating information about Donald Trump. And he loses all of those privilege battles, and the judge orders him to testify. And then reluctantly, he tells the grand jury about Donald Trump's crimes. Donald Trump is still going to jump down his throat.
Right.
And I don't think anything Mike Pence can do will curry favor with Donald Trump's base, because let's face it, they were the ones who wanted to hang him on January 6th. I can't imagine he's going to rebuild a bridge back to those people.
Well, I don't know. There might be some constituency for Mike Pence within the Hang Mike Pence party, so that remains to be seen. Glenn, do you see a world in which Pence is able to win out here and basically shield himself from testifying, by leaning on this whole president of the Senate, I'm a legislator now theory?
No, it's actually an interesting issue that he has raised, but it's sort of been addressed by the Supreme Court over the last 4 or 5 decades. Here's what he's trying to claim. He's trying to claim that because actual legislators, senators and representatives, have what's called speech or debate clause privileges and immunities. And what that means is if legislators are talking about legislation, we don't want them to be dragged in court to have to testify about it. We want them to have this sort of full, unfettered opportunity to robustly debate legislation. Yeah. That is what the speech or debate clause privilege is. Mike Pence says, well, because I am the president of the Senate on January 6th, and I have the ceremonial duty of opening the envelopes and counting the electoral college votes. Of course, we already know what the tally will be.
Just want to be clear. Remember, look how flimsy this reasoning is. Mike Pence thinks it's a better idea to use that flimsy reasoning than to actually cooperate with the Justice Department. That is his assessment of where power in America lies. He knows he is technically in legal hot water here. He knows if he wanted, he could simply be a witness against. Instead, he thinks it's a safer bet to appeal to right-wing extremists. Because in his estimation, right-wing extremists have more power than our Justice Department. They will have more of an effect on his future than our Justice Department. How weak must our Justice Department be?
Therefore, I should have speech or debate clause privilege too, because I am a member of the Senate. I'm a legislator at that moment. To which I say, no, you're not, because the Supreme Court case law talks about how, if you're going to be covered, if your activity is going to enjoy speech or debate clause privileges and immunities, you basically have to be involved in what the Supreme Court refers to as a legislative sphere of activity. And that is not what Mike Pence is doing on January 6th. And here's the other thing. We can look elsewhere to figure out how the courts might resolve this issue. Remember how Lindsey Graham desperately didn't want to testify before the Georgia state grand jury, so he tried to pull out the speech or debate clause card, and every single judge, up to and including the Supreme Court, shot him down and said, no, you have to go in there and testify.
What does Lindsey Graham think of our Justice Department? I'm going to let him go. He's talking more about Lindsey here. What does Lindsey Graham think of it? He thinks it makes more sense to work against it than work with it. He thinks there is more power in siding with right-wing insurrectionists.
Yeah, especially like in his role, in his perfunctory role as just trying to say the preordained number of votes that we already know he had to say. So, Glenn, the fact that Jack Smith is going full steam ahead here, going full scorched earth on this, is there anything that you can glean from that as far as his broader case is concerned?
What I can glean is not so much about the evidence he has or the direction in which he's heading in his investigation, but what it does tell me, Brian, is that Jack Smith is a different kind of federal prosecutor. And I say this with no disrespect to my friends, my former colleagues, the federal prosecutors I worked with for decades. They're a pretty conservative bunch. They do not go scorched earth in their investigations, particularly, and I hate to say it, but this is my lived experience. When it comes to investigating the crimes of the ruling class criminals, the rich, the powerful, the influential, the connected, the political, boy, DOJ tends to sit back on its heels, do the ultra-conservative thing, and take its time. Jack Smith is doing the opposite.
Jack Smith appears to be giving a different answer to the question, do we live in a monarchy? Do we have a group of people who are royals, if not in name, but in how they are treated? Do we have royalty in our country? Jack Smith appears to finally be answering that with no.
He is going 100 miles an hour in the direction of holding the ruling class criminals accountable. And I know we've been waiting for justice for a very long time, but given everything I see out of Jack Smith, I'm starting to feel like maybe there's a little bit of justice kind of peeking out over the horizon.
Yeah, it's a nice change of pace, too, from the pace that Merrick Garland has given, which is to give as much latitude in the world and kind of, basically what strikes me about all of this is that Merrick Garland had exponentially more time than Jack Smith has right now. And yet in the short amount of time that Jack Smith's been here, the fact that he's been able to push forward with all of these things that ostensibly should have happened under Merrick Garland kind of just goes to show that a lot of that time wasn't even used when Merrick Garland should have been moving forward on this stuff and subpoenaing these legislators like Lindsey Graham, subpoenaing Jack Smith, subpoenaing Mike Pence and Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner and on and on. The fact that it didn't happen, but that it took Jack Smith, several years into this investigation, but only 3 years into his tenure, kind of goes to show the difference between these two prosecutors.
Don't forget what you just saw. Tons of crimes in the time that Merrick Garland was appointed till now. Tons of crimes. The statute of limitations has passed on them. There's nothing we can do about them now because of Garland's inaction.
Yeah, when you realize that Jack Smith was only appointed as special counsel on November 18th,
Yeah.
3 months ago, and look at just some of what he's done that, I'm sorry to say, Merrick Garland and company failed or neglected to do, from subpoenaing a former vice president to subpoenaing a former chief of staff to the president of the United States to subpoenaing a White House counsel and a deputy White House counsel and the president's daughter and the president's son-in-law and the president's criminal defense attorneys, which I'm telling you, that's another sort of, a 9 on the legal Richter scale, because usually we do not subpoena the criminal defense attorneys representing the target of our criminal probe, the person we're intending to indict, for obvious reasons. They would have an attorney-client privilege. Jack Smith is going 100 miles an hour, as I say, in the direction of accountability.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you say that out loud. To hear how many people were left untapped in all of that time is kind of, it reeks of malpractice. But in any case, I do want to switch gears a little bit here and talk for just a moment.
I don't. Merrick Garland should be fired. You want to know why I keep saying it? That's why. Because years went by, years of inaction. A committee of civilians, the January 6th committee, was able to get more done in less time without the authority of the Department of Justice. In 3 months, Jack Smith has made real progress. Can you imagine what would have happened if that kind of attitude had been taken into Merrick Garland's activities? What would have happened if the work of the last 3 months had been done 2 years ago? 2 years ago. It's a disgrace. After Trump is in prison, after Giuliani is in prison, I'm assuming those two will actually be convicted, God willing. Garland must be examined for his dereliction of duty.
On Fulton County, Georgia, there's criticism from the right being levied at the jury's forewoman. So where is that criticism coming from, and do you think that it's warranted?
I'm going to skip this because it goes off of our topic of discussion here, which is Trump's crimes. It's ancillary to it. The short answer there, of course I've done that. The short answer there is that no, she was not part of. She's not the indicting jury. She recommended charges. That forewoman. And at the end of the day, it comes down to, did this thing happen or did it not happen? There are so many crimes Trump should be indicted for. Will we get even one? Even one. Before he runs for president again? What if he gets elected? Does the Department of Justice policy of not indicting a sitting president take hold again? Quite possibly. Don't wait. At the conclusion of the stream, let me just appeal to you. There is a link in the description. It will allow you to contact the Department of Justice. Do so. Tell Merrick Garland you expect an indictment as soon as possible. Tell Merrick Garland a lot of the crimes that Trump seems to have committed can now no longer be indicted. That has been a failure of the Justice Department. Tell him that. Put public pressure on these people. Time and again, when we hear why an investigation is moving forward, they talk about public pressure. That's people like you writing emails. That's all that is. People saying, I still see this. People saying, you have failed. People saying, I expect you to do your job. That is what public pressure is. Do it. Put the pressure on them. If you are from one of the 5 fake elector states where there is not an investigation currently at the state level into the fake elector scheme, put pressure on your attorney general to open a state investigation into the fake elector plot. There is nothing stopping a state investigation from running concurrently with a federal investigation. There is no law that says they cannot, so have them do it. I do not trust the federal Department of Justice. As we have seen, they would choose to allow powerful people to get away with crimes by default, unless there is outrage. And we do know they will do a half-assed job. They will let as many people go as they can, and those include the people in your state that tried to steal your vote. They'll let them go. They'll charge as few people as possible. Tell your state's attorney general you won't have it. It's a salty Saturday, folks. I'm salty. But I am glad you joined me today. Thank you for being active participants in American democracy. If we keep it up, if we keep this going, if we support Jack Smith and tell his boss that we expect Jack Smith's recommendations to be followed, we got a shot at keeping this democracy. This has been WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. My name's Jake. I'll see you next time.